there's a story I grew up with that concerns Elvis Costello. It seems that in 1979, Mr. Costello was at a hotel bar getting a bit drunk and proclaiming for all to hear that the only good rock music was British and that American music was a joke, getting more and more adamant and more strident as the night went on. As luck would have it, Bonnie Bramlett was at the same bar that night. If you don't know Bonnie Bramlett, she and her husband Delaney had a hugely influential band called Delaney and Bonnie and Friends. Many of music's heavy hitters played in Delaney and Bonnie and Friends at one time or another, including Eric Clapton, George Harrison, Leon Russell, Rita Coolidge, and Duane and Greg Allman. If that's still not ringing a bell for you, Bonnie was the blonde waitress that worked at the diner in the last few seasons of Roseanne. After hearing all she could tolerate, Bonnie confronted Elvis Costello and told him he had some nerve saying those things about American music when he had Elvis's name and Buddy Holly's looks. She asked him what he thought about Ray Charles, and Mr. Costello's reply included the word ignorant, followed by a racial epithet beginning with the letter N. In response, Bonnie decked him. Playboy magazine gave her an award for it. As you might imagine, the last thing I want to do is hurl unfounded accusations, so I made sure I had my facts straight. According to everything I was able to find online, including an article in People magazine, it all actually happened, more or less the way I just described. It took place in Columbus, Ohio, at a hotel bar. Bonnie was touring with Stephen Stills at the time. In addition to insulting Ray Charles, it seems Elvis Costello used that same racial epithet to describe James Brown. And as Bonnie is a friend of my family, I heard that story long before I heard any of Elvis Costello's music, and this presents me with a problem. Getting my mind to a spot where I can actually hear his music without having these facts color my experience is probably not possible. But people I love and admire love Elvis Costello's music, so I have to do my best. I'm not going to lie, this one is going to be tough. Even before I go into my first impressions of My Aim is True, let me say something first. There's something that persistently makes me a little crazy every time I encounter it. It never fails. I bring up Roy Buchanan, it doesn't matter where, in conversation, in social media, anywhere, someone will always ask me if I like Danny Gatton. Every single time I say Roy Buchanan, someone else says Danny Gatton. It's as if every Danny Gatton fan has made it their life's ambition to pipe up anytime anyone, anywhere mentions Roy Buchanan for any reason. The point is, I know that many folks associate some artists with other artists. I will not be doing that here. So it's my promise to all of you, at no point in this video will I mention Joe Jackson. The songs on My Aim is True are all new to me, except Allison. Although, I do recognize the first few lines of Less Than Zero because of that one time on Saturday Night Live when he started playing Less Than Zero, then stopped midline, apologized to the audience, and then counted off Radio Radio. A couple of interesting things I found out about that SNL appearance. The musical guest was actually supposed to be the Sex Pistols, but they couldn't get their visas in order to be there. Also, if you don't know it, Radio Radio is a song with a strong anti-corporate media message. So the result of calling that audible live on the air was Elvis Costello pissed off Lorne Michaels and got himself banned from SNL for more than a decade. All right, going back to my initial impressions of My Aim is True. Allison aside, there were no real standout tracks for me. I mean, I thought that I'm Not Angry was pretty silly, but nothing really stood out as being musically all that interesting. Don't get me wrong, I didn't hate what I was hearing. It just sounded like slightly above average late 70s, early 80s pop music. In my brain, it would be roughly equivalent to The Cars or maybe Marshall Crenshaw. Not terrible, but not world-changingly great either. I noticed that there seems to be a pattern to the way he puts together his chord changes. Most of the songs follow pretty well-worn harmonic territory, but the thing I notice is that when he breaks out of standard chord changes, he uses one of just a few patterns. Usually the first thing he does is he leads with the 4 chord and then does a 4-to-1 a few times. Then after establishing that pattern, he'll either go to the 3 minor, the relative minor, or the dominant. Interesting enough, I guess, but roughly on the same level as Jessie's Girl or the theme from Friends by the Rembrandts. As I feared, though, through these first few listens, I found myself asking questions and making assumptions that I know have their source in that origin story. I'm trying my best to keep that at bay, but it's not always easy for me to analyze my reactions. How can I tell how much my reactions would be identical, even with fresh ears, and how much is colored by the picture I have formed in my head about what kind of a person Elvis Costello is? Sticking to the strictly tangible and measurable, I do recognize that a lot of the lyrics are flying by me, and I need to be better acquainted with these songs, so it's time for a deeper dive. Boiling it all down to the very bottom line. Do I think these songs are good? Mostly. Do I enjoy listening to them? Not really. I'll freely admit that the chorus of Allison gave me chills more than once. I'll admit that the stops, followed by the switch to the relative minor at the start of the chorus of Blame It on Cain, is pretty cool. And I'll even admit that the guitar trills in the intro to Sneaky Feelings are clever and more than a little difficult to pull off. But there's too much I can't get past. Every time there's a vocal affect, welcome to the working week, or a sarcastic lyric turn, or even the major 6 he uses to end No Dancing, the monologue of my internal music critic always seems to end the analysis of what I was just hearing with the word jerk. And since there's really no avoiding it, let me circle back to that story I opened with. Ever since I started listening to this album daily, my brain has been doing its absolute best to try and find a way to put what happened that night in 1979 into the best possible light. Because let's face it, if Elvis Costello had said those things today, his career would be 100% over. The problem is, even if I start with the assumption of assume he's not racist, the best I can come up with is this. He was so anxious to push music forward that he had to internally identify the older sounds he was attempting to distance himself from as the enemy. When confronted with the old guard in the person of Stephen Stills and Bonnie Bramlett, he was willing to say anything to make them mad and get them to leave, even if he didn't actually believe it in his heart. While that might mean he's not completely racist, a problem remains. Even in the best case scenario, Elvis Costello is still a person who is incapable of showing basic respect and civility to artists whose music he doesn't like. Even if he's not racist, he's willing to sound racist to piss off people he disagrees with. And so what I'm left with is this. I started listening to My Aim Is True thinking I would hear a jerk sing me a bunch of songs. What I came away with was hearing a jerk sing me a bunch of fairly decent songs. The songs themselves were admittedly a bit better than I expected, but nothing I heard did even the smallest bit to dissuade me from the assumption that he's a jerk. Certainly the music by itself does not warrant the kind of attitude he's displayed. It's good music, but it's not that good. And the truth is, he's probably changed by now. If I met him today, I have no doubt that I would come away thinking he was a good person. At least I hope so. For Diana Krall's sake, if for nothing else. But not having that experience of meeting him and learning otherwise, I have to go with what I have. And what I have is, it still seems to me like he's a jerk. So I won't be revisiting this album again anytime soon. And the biggest bummer for me is that I have to fully admit now that I blew an opportunity here. I completely failed to grow my heart at all. I could not let go enough to get to beginner's mind to hear this music. I really hope I do better when I get to Steely Dan.